I think, again, most people know me. I'm Scott Binder. I'm the president of the DC chapter, so welcome. Thank you for coming. Again, I always go over the ground rules. Ground rules are the most important thing. Take care of your trash. Trash cans are out there. Eat all the food up. Bathrooms are through this door. And to get credit, did anyone not sign in when we had the QR code up there?
Oh, I should do that.
Okay.
Get
So
my own credit.
Alex, if you don't mind, can you put that back up? So, again, by doing that, you get CPEs for attending tonight. So just put your, I guess, go into the photo app on your phone, just point it up there, and it should link directly to a very simple sign-in sheet.
Okay. I like that.
So far, it's worked for every meeting we've had this year. We just implemented in January. It's been working great. So I think I confirmed it works with an Android and it works with an iPhone. So no, I have an iPhone. So that's all I know about. So those are the groundkeeping
So
rules.
take the picture, or do I scan it with my QR?
I think what I've done is I just put the photo app up and it automatically goes to the link. So you might be out of luck because we've got no IT folks here to help you out.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm an IT.
I can also type in the URL.
Just type it in. I don't think that works. I don't know if you remember me. I was came here like 2 years ago. I think you were the president for quite a few years. Like, maybe you're president.
Did it work for you?
Well, so now I get to fill in all this.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
it's just a few
Yeah.
basic
Yeah.
lines to fill out.
That's cool.
Yeah, we automated it this year
Thank you.
because our VP of Communications had a hard time reading some of the scribble for email addresses. So this makes it really easy. So those are the ground rules. Couple of the other logistics that I want to talk about. One is we are coming up to October. October is Cybersecurity Month. For the past few years, as long as I can remember, we've actually tried to do 2 meetings in October. We normally do one, and that's obviously the 3rd Tuesday of every month. We've been doing that schedule for over a decade. But for October, we do 2 different meetings. One is our normal chapter meeting, which again is the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And then we also host another one during Cybersecurity Week. Tom, do you know, when is Cybersecurity Week in October?
Yeah,
Do you know that?
21st through the 24th.
So Alex, I think, is going to host us on October 21st.
That's Monday.
Monday.
Yep.
So it's going to be a Monday. So that will be our 2nd meeting of the month. So the topics are still, we are still working those out. We've had some awesome topics in the past, and again, we want to bring you another very awesome group of, either we do a panel or we do a similar topic. Either way, we're going to bring some very well qualified folks here to speak to you. And again, we've got an awesome gentleman here tonight to speak. And I'll introduce him in a moment. As soon as I get some other things out. So, October, we also have an international conference that ISSA puts on. They put it on in a different location every year. This year it's going to be in Dallas, I believe October 1st and 2nd.
I'll be there.
So, what ISSA normally does is they offer each chapter president a free ticket to go. I'm the chapter president, but unfortunately I can't use the ticket this year. I can't go. So it then normally gets to go to the board, if anybody on the board wants to partake in it. I didn't get any takers for that, so the next thing is we offer to the membership. I know it's coming up in 2 weeks. I know it's hard to plan in 2 weeks. But if anybody's interested, we have a free ticket that will get you into the conference October 1st and 2nd. So please come see me if you're interested in using that ticket. It's going to be in Dallas. Awesome barbecue down there. Besides awesome speakers, Joe's going to be there as well, along with some others in the crowd. But if you are interested, again, we have a free ticket for you to use as long as you're a member of this chapter. And that's pretty much all I have to talk about. I'm going to go around to board members to see if they have anything that they would like to say. Tom?
Yep, I'm Tom Hallowell, Director of Programs. I book most of the speakers, or don't book them if the case may be. I've got somebody for November who's Jeremy Grant, and I don't know if he still does, but he used to work right over here. He's with Venable Corporation or company, and he's an identity maven, and the Better Identity Coalition just released their blueprint for better identity, and he's going to talk about that, which is a way of leveraging different elements to be able to create a more solid identity management solution, mostly for citizens, I believe. And that's all I have. If anybody knows of any speakers that they want to recommend, or of any awesome speakers for cyber, we've got a couple things, a couple of ideas, and we're just kind of toying around to try and find something that's really special, because it's a big week and we get a lot of new faces here, so we want to have something that impresses people.
Not only speakers, but if there's any specific topics that you want to hear about, we will also try to find a speaker for any specific topics that you want to hear about as well. Mark, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Hi, Mark Fear, Education VP. Just a plug for our biggest sponsor, Cover6 Solutions. Look them up. Reach out to their admin, Tyrone Wilson. Mention is to DC, and he's likely to cut you a break on his already good prices. I took their SOC Analyst Boot Camp, and it's pretty slick. So I'd recommend Cover6 Solutions.
David?
I'm Dave Seabarth, I'm the membership VP. For those of you who are members, thank you, you make this happen. For those of you who are not, please consider joining the membership. Try it for a year, see if you like it. Come back, we'd love to keep having you as a member. If you haven't renewed your membership, please consider renewing your membership. I do, all the board members are members, we all pay the membership. And it keeps the food going, it keeps us working, we're all volunteers. So, if you have any questions, I'll be available in 15 minutes afterwards. Thank you very much.
And I know Teresa's here, but she must have stepped out. So one thing that Teresa has been trying to plug for us as well is, and I've plugged this in the past too, but we're still looking for a new, completely revamped web. Our website is old. We would like for it to be refreshed. If you or know of somebody, if you yourself have that skill set, or know of somebody that has that skill set, please reach out to me. We'd be happy to work with that person. Or even if there's any high schoolers, they are very good at doing that. You can work with them as well and potentially offer them a good working relationship into IT and learning more about it. So if you know of anybody, again, please send them our way. We'd love to chat with somebody about that. That's all I got. So, again, thank you for coming out. And I know Joe said he wanted to introduce himself, and he could probably do a much better job than I can. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe, take the stage, please.
Appreciate the opportunity.
I'm gonna get you guys to come up because this can't just be me broadcasting one way, right? I expect you to address some of this stuff in between here. I'm gonna give you a bit of a history on where I came from to be able to get to this position, because some of you do know me. Prior to retiring from the Department of Homeland Security, I had spent over a decade focused on software assurance and supply chain risk management. My counterpart in DoD was Don Davidson, the Office of CIO. Now, when I retired, I came into Synopsys. When Don retired, he came to Synopsys as well. Emil Monette, when he retired from DHS, also working in supply chain risk management, came to Synopsys. And there's a reason for that. Synopsys has a kind of a keen interest in this space for supply chain risk management, not just what we do internally, but what we do for our customers and helping them. And that's going to be part of what I talk about here. Prior to being in DHS, I was in the Office of the CIO, so I was in the Pentagon as well, and that's where we started our software assurance initiative for DoD. And again, this is within the context of supply chain risk management. Software assurance has been that, but it's been software. What I'm talking about this evening is something that a lot of people think, oh, Joe, you must have been smoking something. How can you expect secure, high-quality software? And it really comes into a supply chain risk management perspective. And I want to focus on minimizing technical debt. We'll talk about what technical debt is and mitigating the risk. Again, primarily I'm going to focus on the software side of it. But what we've needed to be able to do this is not just the tools to do this, because I can tell you without tools, you can't scale. I mean, you have to understand what that is, but you have to have the measures that you're going to use for testing or auditing software that others are producing. And so that's kind of provides you the context, because you fundamentally understand that today's modern society, we don't run without software. So to give you a little context of who Synopsys is, because I'm willing to bet several of you have never even heard of who is Synopsys. Synopsys is the 15th largest producer of software on the globe. You say, but I've never heard of them. That's because all of our software is tied up in our intellectual property, our tools, that others who build things in this whole internet economy, the ones who build systems on a chip, all the internet of things type thing, the technology that goes into these IoT devices, the microelectronics, it's our technology. And I've never heard of you guys, but if you build things, you would have definitely heard of Synopsys. I'll give you a little rundown on that. But it's as simple as USB flash drives. Every one of you have one of those. We didn't build it, but that's our technology. Yours is probably version 2.0. Some of you might have 3.0, but we already have on USB 4.0. People who build things, from automobiles to telecommunications, you name it. You know, we've got USB plugins, right? That's our technology. And that's how all of our stuff is these are components that have been evolved. As far as when you look at minimizing the footprint, lower power and everything, that's what we've been focusing on. These are verified components. So if you want to build things quickly, you bring in verified components. By the way, software is the same thing. Today, most of our software is not built new software, it's composed. We pull stuff out, and I'm going to address that because that creates great opportunities for us, but it also creates new challenges for us that a lot of people don't realize they have. So Synopsys, while we're a U.S. company, we've got a global footprint. We've got over 115 offices around the globe. We're #1 globally in electronic design automation. It's our tools that are used to build these things. We've got the broadest IP portfolio for building these semiconductors. If you were to look at a chip and look at the space that's on there, and if I was to paint everything purple that Synopsys has, most of the chip would be purple. All the building blocks inside of these chips come as using our technology. We're the #1 leader in application security testing. Both Gartner and Forrester have said that. We're definitely an engineer-driven culture because over 50% of over 13,000 employees have graduate degrees. I mean, it's just, we're engineer-driven as far as what we do. And so we focus on, it's from silicon to software. We've got all the tools in that space. The design, it's the #1 thing that we're really known for. The broadest IP portfolio for silicon-proven IP. It's like interface, analog, embedded memory. Verification, the idea of saying I designed something, but I put the fab out, somebody else built it. We can do the verification that says that is what you designed. And certainly, as I mentioned, with application security testing, that's just who we are. And it's why it's important if you understand the value chain and why we focus on value chain security, which, by the way, Emil's title for our company is value chain security, of looking at that. But EDA and IP and software is really at the heart of accelerating our digital economy. Electronic design automation, it's a huge business in itself. Like I said, we've got kind of captured that part of it. Working with those who've got embedded software, all the stuff that we do is software. We've only got 2 hardware products that even come out, and it's all for emulation. The idea is to speed up your time to market so that while you can concurrently develop your software with your hardware. That's the only reason we provide hardware to people to do it. It's emulation to be able to do that. So we provide that technology to foundries and those who are building the semiconductors. But then when you look in electronic systems, we focus on the area of application security testing. What you built, is it secure? So that's what we as a company have chosen to do. Notice some of the screens are blanking out. But why did I choose to even go into Synopsys? It's because of my focus that I've had all along. If you knew me when I was in DHS, in fact, I used a slide similar to this when I was in DHS, because we focus on critical infrastructure. DHS, the 16 national critical infrastructure, that's what most of our citizens know about. It's all the way from chemical processing, telecommunications, banking and finance. That's great. That's what provides what we do. Most people think in terms of the physical infrastructure that enables that. But the fact that you're in this audience, you fundamentally understand what runs it, what enables it, controls it, is the cyber infrastructure. That cyber infrastructure, that's the area that we focus on. And if you look at the software that's in there, from life essential capabilities, business systems, financial systems, so we have all these dependencies on software reliant capability, from our information communication technology to the embedded IoT devices. But the possibility of disruption is very likely because the software that enables and controls that is very vulnerable. It's subject to exploitation and failure. And again, loss of confidence alone can lead to stakeholder actions that are very concerned because of the disruption of critical business functions. Having come out of the military, as I will tell you, disruption of mission functions is kind of significant. In today's world, when we look at disruption of business functions, we've seen times when the financial sector was taken down. And in some cases, like within 45 minutes, somebody lost over $400 million because of software flaw. It's having impact. But I'm going to talk about the larger impact that we care about here, and we'll get into that. But if you understand today, when you talk about software, the modern apps are really a technology stack. It's not just, oh, I have a piece of software. I've got this application. So certainly we're very familiar with the unit level, and you've got all the things that go in it. You've got coding that goes with it. That provides the business line. But the technology level, you've got maybe a single language, but there's interlayer dependencies already starting to approach. And you're already starting to see vulnerabilities and weaknesses. You're seeing things at the development team level. But here's the reality. We're deploying systems. And software today is the enabler that software is throughout the system level, where you've got the architecture you've got to worry about, there's propagation of risk, and the versioning that goes into all this. So anyone, if you're involved in software, or more particular, are you a user of software? Do you understand the dependencies that go on here? And this is just a reality of where we are with the modern day technology stack. It's not simply of saying it's software. And we're also seeing an era of 9-digit defects. And again, people just say, well, it's software. It's expected. We know it's going to fail. But we're seeing having the effects from airlines to the stock exchange. We're now seeing failure of software. And when I say failure, it's failure either from just poor design, poor implementation, but in many cases, it's exploited. And this is now affecting the board of directors, the CEOs, the CFOs. They understand we got an issue. But their frustration is they don't have ideas about how can I possibly do anything about it. The fact is, what you hear about, it's those bad guys. We got to go after those bad guys. I will tell you the vast majority of exploitation that we see today is not about the ingenuity of those who are attacking. It's about the fundamental vulnerability of the attack hardware. And we're seeing that these guys are not accountable for governance, risk management, business continuity, but they're frustrated because it's about the software. And they're trying to evaluate application risk with relative and relevant measures. What are those? And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. How can you actually take software issues and elevate it to the business level so that people who actually understand business risk can trace it to software and they can actually allocate resources to say, go fix this. What we're seeing is, why do software-intensive systems projects fail? You're going to see the failure causes, but the failure avoidance practices have been there for a long time. In fact, any of you, if you were a student in this area from computer science, software engineering, you would have seen these. We're seeing, though, is that like unsound architecture and coding, we're seeing technical risk measures, and we're seeing quality management, acceptance management with botched deployments, but acquisition management is actually part of the problem here. The people in acquisition procurement are not measured based on the fact that did they actually procure and deliver secure products. No, they are measured based on, did you get something cheap that met my basic functionality? And therefore, there are very few controls that even are associated with that. So software measurement can help us in this area to avoid these risks. And how do they do that? We first of all have to step back and say, why do we care and what's it all about? Because today we have an ever more connected world. We fundamentally understand, well, if I'm in my little world here, that's true. But today you've got many IP addresses just at home, not just in your business. And you've got more devices. And I mean, not just your cell phone, you've got all these other network connectable devices that are hanging out there. And it's happening even more. And in fact, the challenge that we have, if you're in a company, they've traditionally worried about IT security. If they worry about security, it's IT at the enterprise level. And they think about these IoT devices, or OT, operational technology, as something separate. But today we're connecting these to the point that it's blurred about, is there truly a distinction between enterprise IT and OT or IoT? It's all blurred. And the idea that you somehow are trying to make a difference, a distinction, I will tell you in some instances it's because organizationally you say, well, that's Joe's job, he works OT. This is Ned's job, he works in our enterprise IT. So we separate it because we've traditionally done that by organization. But we're finding the problems have this mesh. In fact, you'll start seeing people, even within a software shop, starting to argue whose job it is. It's like separation, security or quality. It's because, well, you're responsible for fixing it. It's like the enterprise just needs it fixed. And this idea that we're spending all this time arguing about who's responsible for it, it's somewhat sad, but it's still a reality because of the way we're doing it. But we are seeing that organizations are expanding their IoT efforts, but they need more comprehensive software security initiative to address weaknesses from the technological vulnerabilities, or what we're seeing is from a lack of basic cyber hygiene. It's not about bad people, it's about people with bad practices. They're simply not paying attention. So cyber hygiene and a lack of caution among those who develop and use these IoT devices. And I don't want to be disparaging too much about it, but with the new generation that we're coming in with our workforce today, they're used to using technology, clueless to the idea about how to secure it, because they don't think that's important. And we're seeing now the consequences that are occurring from that. And many of you are already familiar with the fact that we get a lot of consequences that come with financial implications. But the consequences with these IoT solutions are creating more attack vectors. You know, people will talk about, well, you know, in our company we've got the bring your own device. It's like, yeah, bring your own attack vector to work. Because that's what these are, because these are now hooked up to your enterprise. So these edge devices are the ones that are now subject to snooping, tampering, disruption, and damage. The IoT platform itself, from the data ingestion, analytics, the orchestration, so that's subject to data snooping, tampering, sabotage. And the enterprise themselves, all of these are now hooked up together. But people will say, you know, but these devices, they're really not that expensive. but what you're asking me to do to secure it, that's expensive. So they just said, don't make me secure it. I will tell you that if that's the perspective that you're running into people, if you cannot afford to protect it, you really cannot afford to connect it. Because the cost of recovering from breach and exploitation far exceeds the cost of protecting it. And it's amazing how people are always worried about their budgets. I can't get all the money to do security up front. That's amazing the amount of money you get when there's a major breach. But now your brand reputation is out, the damage is done, all of your customers' data's out. It's like, why can we come up with the money after that's happened? Let's wait for disaster. We're actually starting to see more and more people are saying, you know, you need to keep me out of the news. And so some people are investing in cyber insurance. I'm sure some of your companies have invested in cyber insurance. But if you have not invested in cybersecurity assurance, you're not really going to collect your cyber insurance. And the reason is, it's the equivalent of somebody coming in and saying, okay, I'm going to give you an insurance policy for your home. But that's based on the fact of saying, you claimed that you had a smoke detector. You claimed that you had a fire alarm. You claimed you locked your doors. And now you had a problem. And the insurance company is going to come in and say, I get the right to inspect. Wait a minute, you didn't have the batteries installed for that. You know what, give me my money back. And so we're finding cyber insurance is not really, they pay out, but they now get to go in and do their inspections, and they're now clawing back that money. Cyber insurance is almost like a false sense of security. What it will buy you, though, is a good public relations firm, because they will come in there and help you deal with the press. That's a good thing. But wouldn't it have been nice to invest in cybersecurity assurance up front to avoid the need for that doing? But you know what? That's not sexy. It's far more sexy to respond to all the bad guys that are happening out there. And so we see a growing concern with IoT. I've already alluded to many of this, but it really comes down to lack of security without liability for the growing number of IoT embedded devices in applications, industrial applications, home, healthcare, medical devices. So sloppy manufacturing hygiene compromises privacy, safety, and security, all under the guise of faster time to market. We've got to get it to market, just get it out there. We'll patch it later, we'll fix that later. If you architected it poorly, I don't care what kind of patches you put in there, it's not going to work for you. We're also seeing IoT risks provide more source vectors for financial exploitation. That's in the news all the time. We know that happens. But here's the rub. IoT risks include virtual harm and physical harm. We're actually seeing evidence, we've got numerous studies, actually evidence, I can go through some cases, where a cyber exploitation that caused software failure, it was through software, has gone in and caused physical harm. People have died. Now my question is, how many people have to die before your company will take action? Because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you say, well, my software, as if it's not that important. The problem is a lot of software that's being developed today is now being used in ways that the original developers never envisioned. And certainly they didn't envision their software was going to be hooked up to the internet. It's now web-facing. So there's this growing dependence on external third-party suppliers that's really putting our users and our enterprises more at risk simply because of the exploitable software that they're relying on. And there were studies that have been done. One of them was done in 2016, the Bar Group. They actually surveyed engineers of companies who produced these embedded IoT devices. Now notice they surveyed the engineers, not the lawyers of these companies. And the engineers came back, in fact, part of it was their devices can kill people when improperly used, meaning that if they can be exploited, multiple deaths, single death. Poorly designed embedded devices can kill. Security is not taken seriously enough. Proactive techniques for increasing safety and security are used less often than they should be. This is coming from the engineers because they're saying my company's not letting me do these things. They want to do that, but this is a mindset. It's a cultural thing. Does a company value it? Do they continue to push that out? Yeah.
Can you just give a couple examples of some IoT where the engineers have said that it can kill?
Sure. Infusion pumps in medical devices. In fact, if you've dealt with any white hat hackers, they've been able to demonstrate that. Hespera is actually publicly known, so I'll talk about that. Here's a medical device that had so many known vulnerabilities in it that the FDA actually demanded it to be pulled off the market. And because what this did, there were the known vulnerabilities would essentially say, I'm standing outside the hospital. I can now search, and it's easy to get into a hospital network. Search and say, oh look, Alex is laying in that bed. He's hooked up to an infusion pump. Let me remotely change the amount of drugs that is going into his body. Alex dies. And you know the sad thing about this? Is these have
Sorry,
no
Alex.
data recording or data logging.
Alex.
Yeah,
It's-
why me? Why me?
Front row.
It's,
Don't you care about me, Scott? What
This-
the hell?
This is a perfect example, though, of the sadness of it. It's because on these devices, and that ranges from many different types of IoT devices, they don't have data logging or data recording. Unlike an airplane where you have a black box, these devices don't have it. So, and this is also true of vehicles. And remember the white hat experience there where they hacked the Jeep Cherokee and did it? Again, no data logging on board the car, but they had a reporter in the car, and he's saying, the car's being taken over, it's turning, it's braking, it's just, he couldn't do anything about it. And so that's when all of a sudden, and by the way, GM knew about this for over 5 years. But now all of a sudden that made public, it went public like that, Congress got involved, now they're fixing it. 5 years. They knew about this, as that you could take over that. There's multiple things where we've got evidence, some of we can't talk about, yes.
But GM didn't take blame for it. They blamed the communications company that,
Yeah, you know what, so,
so it's on their, it's on the communications.
here's an
team
interesting thing that comes
contract.
into play now. The courts are starting to say, Mr. Auto Manufacturer, you can't blame these sub-tier suppliers because you chose what to put on board. You chose the software, you chose the airbags, you chose. Don't blame it on your sub-tier suppliers. That's how the courts are playing out on this. And by the way, in this space, I actually thought about including a whole section here on software liability. And this is now playing out with torts and everything about blaming. There's a lot of things being settled out of court now. Lawyers are making lots of money in this space. But you're not seeing changes in the law because they're settling it out. It's interesting. And what they typically do, it's not software itself, but it's software that is enabling a device. So I'm going after you for the device.
Airbag.
Yeah. And so, yes, that's happening. Now, in the case of automobiles, all these others, it's like, well, how many people can you prove have died as a result of it? I just told you, no data recording, no data. And so that, I testified on a congressional caucus on robotics. They specifically had it on autonomous driving. Now, the first two panelists were talking about all the great things that autonomy is going to bring us, which, by the way, I agree. Autonomy is bringing us some great things because over 3/4 of all the accidents can actually be attributable to driver error. Either under the influence, medication, whatever but it's driver error. So that takes it off the table.